Thank you very much. And Ken, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Great, thank you. Um, I can't tell if you're seeing my slides or you're still seeing Shonda's slides. If someone could just give me that heads up.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
can see him.
Okay, perfect. Um, DoD is largely used to Teams and Zoom, causes me all sorts of fits and starts. So welcome it and thank you to the TOC for letting us come and talk a little bit about wargaming exercises, models, and simulations, what we call GEMS, here at the National Defense University. I should say off the top, just so my lawyers are happy, that the remarks we're going to give today are our own and not necessarily representative of the U.S. government, Department of Defense, National Defense University, or anyone else for that matter. So I'll start with a little bit of context about who the National Defense University is, as well as the center, which I'm very happy to run, at least most days. I say that smiling. Then I'll turn it over to Ginger, who will talk a little bit more about the College of Information and Cyberspace, CIC, CapEx, capstone exercise. I will be monitoring as I can. If you see me dart my eyes over, I've got the chat open on another screen. So I'll try to follow along on those two. But if there are questions along the way, please don't hesitate to stop us and ask. We'll also try to preserve a bunch of time near the end. Okay. So looking at the National Defense University, we are, depending on how you count, the years, a little over 100 years old, starting from the Eisenhower School or its predecessor, the Industrial College of the Armed Forces, or prior to that, it was the Armed Forces College for Resource Strategy, or something like that. It predates me by a few decades, and the National War College. So today, NDU is comprised of 5 colleges. The National War College, the Eisenhower School for Resource Strategy, the College of Information and Cyberspace, which we'll talk a little bit about our exercise with them coming up here in a minute, and the College of Information and Cyberspace, all located here in DC on Fort McNair. And then down in Norfolk, we have the Southern Campus, comprised of Joint Forces Staff College. We also have a satellite center at Fort Liberty, formerly known as Fort Bragg, North Carolina, that focuses on educating special operators. What really makes us unique in our estimation is what you see on the screen. So unlike a lot of other training and educational institutions, our principal focus is whole of government, whole of nations, and international. We do that with our student demographic. So we have military officers, generally from the US, ranging from 04 or majors in the Army and Marine Corps, as well as the Air Force, or lieutenant commanders in the Navy or Coast Guard, and up to 06s, so colonels and Navy captains. We also have civilian private sector, civilian US government, international fellows. This year, I think we have 156 international students from about 74 different nations. And we bring them together in a very intentional way to help engage their learning, not just from our curriculum, but from each other. Similarly, our faculty is represented by the military, by civilians, by private sector, occasionally an international fellow, or international instructor as well. And then we also have deep ties inside and outside the Beltway with other departments and agencies of the U.S. government, think tanks, academic consortia, internationally, et cetera. Inside of NDU, Castle is what we would like to refer to as the lab component. So if you're thinking about the typical college education, so we offer master's degrees here. It's a 10 and a half, 11-month program for the master's degree. We also have shorter courses focused on various pieces and parts of national security policy, national defense policy, things like that. But what we have is the ability and the mandate, and I'll talk about our mandate on the next slide, to allow our students to learn by doing. I think all of us know, at least empirically, that active learning, experiential learning, and how we think about adult education in particular is really focused and broadened by learning by doing. So the students will go to a class, either a seminar or a lecture, and then last year, 121 times across the 5 colleges, they had an opportunity to participate in an exercise conducted and written by Castle. So this slide has a lot of words on it. I do apologize for it. What I like to tell everyone on it is there's 3 main areas. Top left, in essence, what that says is learning by doing and active learning exercises, again, what we call GEMS, is imperative, and we need to grow that further in our academic model. And that comes out of the NDU strategic plan. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff also signs out a policy, 1800.01G is the current version of it. And the purple down the bottom middle talks about outcomes-based military education, encouraging use of live virtual constructive gaming methodologies, war games, exercises, etc., to achieve program learning outcomes. By the way, I should also say, because I tend to speak with acronyms, if anyone doesn't track what they are, please just let me know. The most important part of this slide is actually tucked away in the top right. So that's Bloom's taxonomy. And what I would posit is wargaming, games, exercises, models, simulations, all of those immersive experiential opportunities that we provide the students really allow them to get to the higher levels of that taxonomy. And I think that's where we start deviating slightly from the lower level schools across the PME community, professional military education community, where it's about application of what you learn, analyzing what you're hearing, evaluating, and creating new thought. And gaming is really good at that. First-person shooters are a lot of fun. They're really good at understanding. That's not what we do at all. And that's at the lower end of the taxonomy. What we're really proud of, I've got a team of about 15 full-time war gamers. So 15 divided by 121 in less than a year. We take a lot of time to try to figure out what works given the constraints we have. Time in the classroom. Can we offer an exercise or portions of the exercise as homework, if you will? What's the subject matter? How do people learn? So finding those multimodal opportunities for visualization, being able to physically touch, write, do, all matter to us greatly. And so we find the right tool from the toolbox, whether that's a more traditional tabletop discussion, as you can see represented in the top left. People hunkered over a map on the table, trying to figure out what the strategic approach is, whether that's computer assisted. Top right, that's a image from Joint Forces Staff College where they're looking at a common operating picture, trying to develop their strategy for the operations going on in the background. Matrix gaming is a facilitated open play model where it's constantly evolving based upon student action. So student teams start with, I want to do X in order to have Y effect. I believe I can do it because Z attributes. And then each of the other groupings or teams have an opportunity to reinforce or offer contradictory information. Yes, you might be able to achieve it physically, but it won't achieve the desired results because of A, B, and C. Success or failure is determined through adjudication, and then based upon success or failure, the storyline changes immediately, and then the next team goes and the next team goes. Fantastic for allowing students to think on their feet. Challenging to keep facilitators like Ginger and myself always one step ahead of where the students might be going, but incredibly rewarding and a lot of fun. And I think the students get an awful lot out of it. Board games, card-based games, in this case, bottom center, that looks at counterinsurgency, or one model of it. You'll note there is no geography on it. We specifically wanted to take geography out, so we're talking about the tenets of counterinsurgency and how to deal with it. So insurgents or the government gain benefit or a bane depending on where they control on the board. It's an uneven, unbalanced game, meaning the insurgents have different rule sets and victory conditions than the government. The theory on that one, just in brief, being insurgents only have to win once. Governments have to be right and prevent insurgent attacks all the time. So trying to mirror that in a constructed fashion. We produce tasking injects, background materials, things like that. So bottom right is a simulated document coming out of the White House for purposes of the exercise. So this slide is really showing the process we go through. The top portion is kind of the simple wire diagram or flow chart. There's a request. We talk about goals and objectives, as we all should, and probably all do when it comes to training and education. What are we trying to achieve and why? What do we want the students to do and why? And then after that, we can talk about structure and methodology. Is that a tabletop? Is that a matrix, a board game, etc.? Research and development of the selected methodology and scenario background. We execute, perform analysis, and inject lessons learned. It's nice, it's simple, it's pretty, it's wholly inaccurate. So that's why we have what I call the mountain chart down in the bottom. That is our attempt to better reflect that these things aren't linear and they stack on top of each other. So the color code is the same. First month, that far kind of left portion of the mountain chart, you can see we start with the lessons learned and discussing goals and objectives, talking a little bit about structured methodology, a little bit of research. But then by the second break, where you see the first number 4, the time goes down in terms of lessons learned, but significantly up, for example, on research. And that red spike at the end with the 3 to 9 variable on it is really the smallest part of the exercise, but it's the part everyone sees. It's the execution of the event. And then the numbers represent rough order of magnitude, number of people involved in our game design teams and execution teams. Also a highly variable level. And then just to tee up what Ginger will be talking about here in a second, this is the table of contents for Flashpoint, which we used a couple years back for the CIC capstone exercise. So we talked a little bit about matrix gaming as a primer, gave the concept and schedule, and then we gave them rules, role descriptions, defined what the tokens were that would be on the board, scenario vignettes, and the like. So we go through a lot of preparation material to make sure the faculty and the students are well prepared and not coming in flat-footed. And with that, I think I will go on mute and turn it over to you, Ginger.
Thank you. I apologize for the camera. It does not like me. It evidently just likes Teams. Okay, so I will second the fact that we usually have faculty pamphlets that are up to about 70 or so pages, and the same for the students as well. And we're pretty sure maybe about 2 or 3 people actually read them. So we come up with situations like this and nice little cheats, lots of cheats. So this is a breakdown of the capstone exercise that was actually played in 2023. It was the capstone for CIC, the College of Information and Cyberspace. They do deal with both information and cyberspace. So as we were building out the exercise, we talked to a lot of the faculty about the objectives. What did you want us to reinforce? Any particular domains, which obviously for CIC would be the information space, but also mostly the information instrument of power and how cyberspace is different from that. And even if you ask the students and the teachers, it was interesting. They always had something to say about those objectives. And how they attacked the game actually basically exemplified the differences that they saw. So the faculty always thought that was interesting, how they were actually attacking the index that we gave them and how they were viewing it. We had them mostly look at the roles and relationships through the DIME spectrum. So the diplomatic, informational, military, economic instruments of national power, and how they applied those to strategic leadership, effective communication, creative thinking, decision-making, ethical conduct, and so the format of it, we split it up. We had about 50 students. So we split them up in 2 worlds. And there was a competition phase and conflict phase in both worlds. The students were divided into role playing, and their roles were pretty much 3 students each for US, Russia, ASEAN, had 6 because they're 3 different countries, China, Japan, and Taiwan. Now, the reason we did that was ASEAN in the competition phase has to play as ASEAN, but that breaks out in the conflict phase because obviously Indonesia, Philippines, and Singapore as sovereign nations have, different views of certain things, and that all comes up within the gameplay. And the other thing that we came up was the fact that student teams themselves were running an AAR. So they had an analysis team that was walking around, watching both worlds and seeing if it was hitting the learning objectives that CIC had. And CIC did pick these specific students to play these roles. The whole exercise was played over 5 days. 3 half days, 2 full days. First day was intro, and then we did a sample of the competition round. And then the next day was the competition round. So just think strategic communications, all of the nastiness that comes up with competition, but under the threshold of conflict. Then the next day we went through what the conflict phase is going to look like. And then the next day after that, because we gave them a whole half day to talk to their countries and basically form a plan as they went into the conflict phase. And that was the game I'll show you, which is Flashpoint Taiwan Strait. And then the last day was talking about how did it go? How did the did the students interpret how other students, they basically go and interview the students in both worlds and see how it went. Next slide. So this is what it actually looks like. And this is the reason we kind of broke it up into 2 phases. One is more of a crawl, walk, run. The first part, this is actually what you're looking at is the run. So this is what we want them to work their way up to. But matrix gaming is not a steadfast set of rules. So you kind of have to teach the students how to play matrix games first. It's all based on your argumentation and basically adjudicating that through your peers and your knowledge. And the facilitator usually figures out percentages off of the arguments that happen. Probably the biggest and most important thing in any matrix game is the roles that you have the students playing. We always give role sheets, which is how the ends, ways, and means of how this country usually interacts with other people. And we encourage a lot of outside research. Usually the the faculty members of the class assign certain people to certain countries because of their background or their interest, or they have an innate knowledge of that country. And then as you can see, I guess you can't see where I'm pointing, can you? You have all the tokens down at the bottom, which any of the countries can put on the map, and they have to say one action, just one. Do not give us multiple ones, we will shut you down. You have to give us one action that you, as your country, would like to do. Fawn ops is usually one of the first levers people pull. They want to show strength in the area, so you have fawn ops. However, if you have 3 people doing fawn ops in the Luzon Strait, for example, you're going to have an issue. So you've got indicated risk here. So if there's piling up, there's more than 2 or 3 countries in a geographic location, usually we roll because there might be an incident there. So we have to kind of keep going and seeing what makes logical sense. And as facilitators, you have to figure out and gauge their argument to see if it doesn't make sense, do you call them out on it, or do you wait for the other students playing the other countries to call them out? Usually there's one person on every team who will call out somebody who thinks they are playing foul. It's just the way it works. So usually as facilitators, you don't have to point out what's obvious to you. Someone else will do it for you. So you encourage just enough to get them to be thinking about those risks and what happens. So next slide. This should have been really reversed. Okay, so the competition phase. This was because, as everyone knows, there's a slight emphasis on strategic competition these days within the curriculum. So the students have to start trying to figure out basically how to construct an argument that will work within the nuances of the game. So we have one world that has 25 people. They get together and they are given 3 injects. Like for the competition round 1, it deals mostly with cyber and information ops, and you have 3 injects. South Korea considers joining Quad, unauthorized Chinese police activities in the US and Asia, disinformation impact, Vietnam PRC border. So you have those 3. In that one world, Russia decides and assigns which one of their 3 is going to which room that deals with that one inject. So say you have a South Korean expert in there, Russia, go send your South Korean expert to that one. And so they have to themselves self-organize. So this is kind of the first thing we're looking for. How are they, who are the leaders in the group? How are they self-organizing? And how are the people who they assigned, was that a good thing or not? So that's about 5 minutes. And then say, okay, 10 minutes. You break out of your cells and the student countries go to their other rooms. So already we're dealing with 6 rooms, 2 big rooms for each world, and then 3 auxiliary rooms for each world. So once you get to that one room, say for the South Korean considers joining the Quad room, you meet a facilitator who's either from Castle or a trained up faculty member. Usually it's Castle, and we have to kind of pull up some other facilitators because doing a metrics game, if you haven't done one or facilitated one before, can kind of be a challenge because you have to stay You have to stay in front of the narrative while the narrative is being created. You have to guide the narrative where you need it to go to hit the learning outcomes. And you have to make them think that was their idea. And it usually is. So it's how you form it. So once you get into the auxiliary rooms, you have matrix games rounds where the student proposes a policy action and they turn to address basically the vignette. So they have to describe the desired effect they want from this one action. And if everyone agrees, the facilitator sits there and says, yes, I think South Korea should be considered to join the Quad. How would China feel about that? And then you get into if it's plausible for that to happen, and then you assign some type of percent. Let's say they have one action that has, okay, they've done this tack before, they're really good at it, so that has probably about a 70% chance of success. Does that ring true to everyone? Because don't discount these people's intelligence. You need to get them to own their intelligence that they have, but to learn from others as well. So actually ceding a little control to your students is a good idea here, but don't give them too much. They'll swim all over. So you say, okay, give them a 10-sided die and say, okay, about 70% chance of success. Here's a 10-sided die, meet or beat a 3. So they roll the dice. If they meet or beat a 3, then that action was successful. So after you go through 2 or 3 rounds, Russia gets their say, PRC, USA, Taiwan, all reacting to this inject that we have crafted to bring out certain things in each inject. So that was probably on this one, the competition phase and getting those injects exactly to address what we wanted to do and the questions we wanted to make sure they knew. That was probably the biggest challenge of this one, was just making sure that we could actually hit all those so the students could have those conversations. They could weigh the risks, they could weigh the advantages, and basically how to position themselves the best they could in case this world went to conflict. Which, shocker, since we have a conflict phase, it went to conflict. So the conflict phase is basically same thing. We taught them how to do and how matrix game worked in the competition phase. Now we just bring it over to the conflict phase. They're a little more fluid with the structure. They're much better, but now they have these tokens to play with. Now they have a lot more dime, I guess you could say, because they already have built their world. So they already have kind of buy-in on each one of their worlds. So they kind of want to protect it. They've actually made it. So you've actually got buy-in from a lot of these students. You'll never get them all, but you can at least get buy-in from the majority of the students. So by the time you hit conflict, they figure, okay, Russia and China honestly are usually the really bad guys by this point. It's just how this game always shapes up. And then you see USA, Taiwan, and Japan that are starting to get together. And then ASEAN is usually playing the edges. It's when we play this specific version, it's just kind of how it checks out. Now, if you have different players, like we've brought in Japan, we've brought in Philippine as a major player, those dynamics change. So that goes back to, you really have to think about what players and what roles you want to have to explore the exact content and the exact questions that you want your students to be examining. And then after that was finished, we talked to the students talked to the facilitators, or the student action committee, talked to the facilitators, and we ran the AAR with the faculty and the students to see if this was actually a worthwhile exercise. Were they able to actually explore what they were learning in a unique way to where they actually felt they could apply the knowledge that they had learned? And then I'll end with just, this was from our student impact. It's the last slide. This was from the director of institutional research at CIC. She's basically, Linda, she does the evaluations. And this was, I think, her second year when she was doing this. And this was the write-up that she had based off of it. But they thought this one was particularly good. We've run this 2 times. Yeah, we're doing our second one now. And we keep adding to it, gutting to it, and then saying, okay, what can we do better? We've added a lot more cyber to it because it's CIC, but each time we run it, we learn a lot more from the iterations. So it's always good. But CIC has been very good as into giving us a lot of days where we can be very experimental with their student base. And everyone's kind of a really good sport about it. So it's pretty good. That's all I got. Ken?
All right, and I'll just close again before we get to questions and answers. That's my contact information. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of if anyone wants to follow up or has some thoughts or wants to discuss wargaming, gaming exercises in a broader sense. So turn it back over to everyone here with us for any questions you might have.
Feel free to put your questions in the chat, or you can put them in the question box. It was a lot of information.
It was, and gone through at lightning speed to preserve as much time. Question from Justin. Thanks, Justin. Do you design most of the content yourself? Yes, is the short answer. Ginger, I'd say by and large, 95%.
Yeah, pretty much.
Is how we design. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of the context and information comes from other sources. So it's grounded in some sense of reality.
Yeah, we do mostly the scenarios we basically go to the content experts and say, hey, does this seem plausible? And they're like, well, yeah, that would be good. Would this get to your learning objectives? Would something like this be applicable? Are there any specific questions you want us to pull out of the students' address? And then we build that within the scenario. And hopefully we can at least play test 2 or 3 times with faculty, which is I think I've only seen that once, so that's ideal, but you never get them that much. Usually you're lucky if you can get faculty with one because we're just kind of all over the place.
See a couple of additional questions coming in. Cynthia and Shonda both put in something effectively asking if there's a program used to develop these events or to facilitate the game. I will say work in progress. So a lot of simulations, true computational simulations are available for things that are at the operational and tactical level. It's a lot harder to simulate a global environment when you inject, I don't know, people's personalities into the mix. The psychology of how to engage with, your favorite dictator in, name a country, or how to engage multinational organizations with different cultural dynamics interspersed within it. Think NATO. Makes it very hard to find something, but I think artificial intelligence is going to get us there eventually. It's just not there, at least not there at the level we can fund internally today. Facilitation, you really do need a human in the loop, in my opinion, particularly for Matrix gaming. There is the occasional student or faculty member or participant of whatever variety, if this wasn't for a student audience, that pushes back on, well, I don't think it would go that way.
Don't fight the scenario.
Super. Remember that rule I put out in my in brief that said the facilitator is God for the day? We're back to that. And that's really to control the environment in the room. Let's see here.
I will chime in on AI.
Yeah.
AI does make perhaps some research better. It can do some audio and visual stuff that's really neat that you can add to it. But at the moment, we have to check it so much or tweak it so much. It's really not worth the effort to bring it in. It can come up with its own scenarios, but ultimately, we're human and we'd like to use our own. But it always needs to be tweaked in one way or the other, specifically since it is being used in an educational way. We need to make sure that the learning outcomes are being hit and certain benchmarks that the faculty members want us to hit are already incorporated within the context. But it can really do audio and visual stuff that as of this year, we haven't been able to incorporate. So that stuff's kind of neat to add to it.
Thanks, Julia. Another question from Denise. How have we evaluated the success of the project to determine the improvement? That's really a discussion in the after action report and beyond. So that's direct conversation, that's surveys, and then it's interpreting the data. And then it's talking with the faculty separately from students, with leadership from across the university. If we bring in distinguished visitors, senior officials from across the US government or elsewhere, what were their takeaways? Okay. For example, senior leader a couple of years ago, not on this project. Well, the students came up with a pretty elementary design for the topic they were discussing. Okay, so was that a product of the students? Was that an artifact based upon how the game was shaped? So then Ginger and the team have to really deconstruct and reconstruct that and try to think through where something might have differed from a play test to, live real world in quotes, if you will. Dr. Gary Powell, is there, or in what situations or contexts would games or sims not be advisable, or perhaps a particular type of learner? I will be the first person, and this so far has not gotten me into trouble, and I'm assuming we're all friends here. I will be the first person to tell you I'm not a used car salesman. If I think an exercise or a game will not work, I'm not going to sell you that car, so to speak. It doesn't always make friends, because people come in with a really solid idea in their mind that a game or an exercise or a simulation will work. Where it can absolutely not work in the world, according to Ken. Been here 22 years as a professional war gamer. It cannot prove your point for you. I had a very senior level person in the Pentagon a dozen years ago, wanted an exercise, great topical area, really important kind of over the horizon issue. Went in to sit with him, talk about goals and objectives, what he really wanted to achieve out of it. And what he wanted to achieve is prove my point is accurate, boiled down. No. If you want to do that, then write a paper, present it at a symposia or something. Exercises are human endeavors. You should not control every aspect of human engagement in an exercise. So I think that's the one major thing that it can't do. But there are hundreds of little small examples that can't really do that. But if you're willing to, move the dial a little bit left or right, we can make it work. In terms of types of learners, I think the biggest challenge in terms of types of learners, looking at our student population, average age of our students across the campuses is about 43. You can't make it so complex a learning system that they shut down, you know. Well, if you roll a 3 on a yellow die on an alternate Tuesday, then you can advance 3 space. It doesn't work, you know, and I'm obviously being glib for purposes of the example. You have to make it in an environment and in a way that looks familiar to them. And I think that's really where, as we move forward with technology here at the university, inside of Castle and writ large within the training and educational community, we have to keep looking at what the upcoming generation sees and does and how they learn and absorb information. You know, as we enter the digital native phase, if you will, and I'm not in love with that term, but you know, those that always grew up with some sort of computing power in front of them, personal computing, calculators, et cetera, et cetera. The way they learn and absorb information is certainly changing. Scrolling through, did I miss anything on any of that, Ginger?
Not on that. I think Jeff Abbott.
Yep.
Do you integrate the IC as partners, perhaps as part of the information instruments of power? Yes, I like the IC, and they are not as, I mean, we actually have members here from several different agencies, and their knowledge that they bring to the games is very interesting, mostly because you have some straight up military people from all different branches, but they only see things sometimes through a rigorous lens. And you have some people from the IC, state, US AID, whole bunch of other agencies who can actually just ask the random questions about maybe logistics that they didn't think of, or you do realize we don't even have relations with that country type thing, you know, that some wouldn't think of. But yeah, you can apply. I think you asked a little later too about the strategies. Let's see, how other government agencies could apply what you've learned to conduct their own simulations. Oh, certainly. These are just game mechanics that you can use. FEMA uses a lot of simulations and for analytics as well, but a lot of disaster scenarios, a lot of disaster response, NEO evacuations, and embassy evacuations as well. And we just ran another one that had it was Coronado Island, and it was a terrorist threat that was chemical, but it obviously, if you know anything about Coronado Island out of San Diego, it obviously didn't stay on Coronado Island, and it floated to obviously San Diego. So it was who has the authorizations, who has who gets to actually say who is the station commander, who's the what does the station what do you call it, the base commander do? So that was dealing with a whole bunch of permissions, policies, authorizations, authorities, and until I ran that exercise, I had no idea it was so complicated. So neither did the person who was she was Department of State. She knew all about the policies of her particular nature, but she didn't know any of the other permissions, and the fact that she couldn't literally talk to this person because she was federal and the other person was state. So they couldn't even open a line of communication until I believe an emergency was declared by the president. So it was just interesting, the conversations you have through these. So if you can, definitely get a definitely get a natural disaster response, you know, scenario going, because all you have to do is think about it, and then you can, you know, talk to us or, you know, pretty much any other people who do gaming mechanics to do it. Of course, I just volunteered us for more work, so I'll have to give you a hand.
That's all right. I'll meter the requests as they come in. So I'll follow up quickly on that last piece too. We rely heavily on other elements of the federal government that have models and simulations. So I was running an exercise for a non-NDU federal government audience handful of years ago, and they wanted to simulate an earthquake and the impact that would have on their day-to-day operations on one of their or at one of their sites. I went to the US Geological Survey and said, if I put an earthquake at this lat long, is that possible? And what would that model look like? Because here's what I would think it would based upon, you know, previous earthquakes in that region. And they ran the model for me. FEMA obviously has a ton of models. The Department of Energy and their federal labs obviously have a ton of models. So it's all about connecting with the right groups. It's sometimes a little bit hunt and peck to try to find the right group. But I find if you go in, if there isn't a wargaming or an exercise shop inside of a department or agency, if you go in either to the secretary's office, you know, kind of their front office and ask the question, or into the security office and ask the question, you can usually find who has something coming up. Do we ever allow small group observers, such as cadets from military service academies? Yes, under kind of strict conditions, and some of that's based upon not wanting to upset the dynamics in the room by having observers, and some of that's just physical space. You know, the rooms are not always as large as I would like them to be. Can we receive a copy of this presentation? Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. Shonda, I'll get it over to you. I have a medical appointment right after this, so I'll get it to you tomorrow.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ken.
I think we've caught up with all of the questions. We do have, I think, another couple of minutes if there's any lingering questions or concerns. Otherwise, I'm happy to have Ginger dance. Her camera doesn't work, but you know, you can trust she's dancing.
No, you can't.
A little bit of an interpretive behind the scenes dance, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you very much, Ken and Ginger. I do appreciate you sharing all of this very fascinating information, and thank you to our individuals who are online giving us some great questions. Much appreciated there. Just another quick plug. We do have, you know, our TOC 25 conference in April. So if you are interested in seeing more like this and sessions like this and above and beyond, and meeting with your fellow learning and development professionals, please feel free to register on trainingofficers.org. All right, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and end our session. And I want to just once again thank Ken and Ginger for being here with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Tthank you.
Sure.